Think about the last time you lost control. Maybe it was an argument, maybe it was stress at work, maybe it was just traffic. And in that moment, emotions took over. Your heart raced, your mind clouded, and you reacted. Now, imagine if you could pause, if you could take control, if instead of reacting, you responded with clarity, with confidence, with intention. Because here's the truth. Our emotions don't control us. We control them. And when we learn how, we change everything. How we lead, how we connect, how we experience life itself. So let's talk about emotional mastery. Emotions are powerful. They shape our experiences, influence our decisions, and define how we interact with the world. But here's the key. Emotions are not commands. They are not orders we must obey. They are simply information, data points, signals. And like any data, their value comes from how we interpret them, not from their mere existence. Think about a moment when you felt angry. That anger wasn't random, it was a signal. Maybe it meant a boundary was crossed. Maybe it meant you felt unheard, unappreciated, or powerless. The anger itself wasn't the problem. The problem was what happened next. Did you lash out? Did you shut down? Did you let that emotion dictate your actions without understanding what it was truly telling you? This is where most people get stuck. They assume that if they feel something, they must act on it. If they feel fear, they avoid. If they feel anger, they attack. If they feel sadness, they withdraw. But emotions are not meant to control us. They are meant to guide us. They are internal messengers, delivering important insights about our needs, our values, and our experiences. Take fear, for example. Fear is one of the most misunderstood emotions. People treat it as a stop sign. But fear isn't always telling you to stop. It's telling you to pay attention. There's a difference. Fear might be signaling that you're stepping outside your comfort zone, that you're taking a risk, that something is at stake. And in many cases, that's exactly where you need to be. If you react to fear without questioning it, you retreat. You miss opportunities. You stay small. But if you treat fear as data, you ask a different question. Is this fear protecting me from danger, or is it pushing me toward growth? That one shift changes everything. The same applies to anger. Anger is often viewed as a negative emotion, something to suppress or avoid. But anger isn't inherently destructive. It's an alert system. It's telling you that something you care about is being threatened. Your values, your expectations, your sense of fairness. If you let anger take over, you lose control. You react impulsively. But if you step back and ask, what is this anger trying to tell me? You gain clarity. You see the root cause instead of just the surface reaction. Maybe it's telling you to address a problem in a relationship. Maybe it's showing you that something needs to change. Maybe it's revealing a deeper insecurity or unresolved frustration. The anger itself is not the issue. It's what you do with it that matters. Sadness works the same way. Most people try to escape sadness, but sadness is a signal too. It's a sign that something meaningful has been lost, that something deeply valued is missing. It can reveal what truly matters to us, what we need to heal from, what we need to process. Ignoring sadness doesn't make it disappear, and letting it consume us doesn't move us forward. But when we sit with it, listen to it, and ask what it's showing us, we gain deeper self-awareness. The challenge is that we live in a world that conditions us to react to emotions rather than interpret them. We feel discomfort and we look for a quick fix. We feel frustration and we blame someone else. We feel anxiety and we numb it with distractions. But the real power comes from slowing down and asking, what is this emotion trying to tell me? Because once we understand that emotions are not directives, once we see them as data instead of commands, we gain control. We stop reacting impulsively and start responding intentionally. We make choices based on clarity, not just instinct. And that is the foundation of emotional mastery. Perspective is everything. It is the lens through which we interpret the world, the filter that shapes our experiences, and the foundation of how we respond to life's challenges. Two people can go through the exact same situation and come out with completely different conclusions, not because the situation itself was different, but because their perspectives were. Imagine two people stuck in traffic on their way to work. One person is fuming, gripping the steering wheel, thinking, this is a disaster, I'm going to be late, my whole day is ruined. The other person, sitting in the same traffic, takes a deep breath and thinks, well, I can't control the traffic, but I can use this time to listen to an audiobook, reflect, or simply enjoy a moment of stillness before a busy day. Same external event, completely different internal experiences. This is the power of perspective. It determines whether we see obstacles or opportunities. It decides whether we feel stuck or see a path forward. It influences whether we focus on what we've lost or what we still have. Perspective isn't just about optimism or positivity. It's about choice. It's about realizing that we are not prisoners of our circumstances, we are interpreters of them. What happens to us is only part of the story. The meaning we assign to it is what shapes our emotions, our reactions, and ultimately our actions. Take failure, for example. Some people see failure as proof that they're not good enough. They internalize it, believing it defines them. Others see failure as feedback, as a necessary part of growth. They look at it, extract the lesson, and adjust. The actual event, falling short of a goal, making a mistake, experiencing a setback, is the same. But the interpretation changes everything. This is why two athletes can lose a game and walk away with completely different mindsets. One beats themselves up, convinced they'll never be good enough. The other says, all right, what can I learn from this? Where do I need to improve? The game was the same, the scoreboard was the same, but the perspective determines what happens next. Perspective also shapes our relationships. Imagine someone doesn't text you back right away. One perspective says, they're ignoring me, they don't care. Another perspective says, they're probably busy, it's not about me. One interpretation creates anxiety and resentment, the other creates patience and understanding. And in reality, we rarely have all the facts, we just have the story we tell ourselves. Our perspective even influences our past. Two people can go through a difficult childhood, face adversity, or experience loss. One person sees it as a curse, something that permanently damaged them. The other sees it as fuel, a source of strength that shaped who they are today. The past doesn't change, but the meaning we assign to it does. This doesn't mean we should ignore challenges or pretend everything is fine when it's not. It means that we always have a choice in how we see things. We can ask better questions. Instead of, why is this happening to me? We can ask, what can I learn from this? Instead of, this is impossible, we can ask, what is one step I can take? Instead of, I have to do this, we can say, I get to do this. Perspective isn't about denying reality. It's about choosing the most empowering way to interpret it. Because the way we see things doesn't just change how we feel, it changes what we do next. Every emotion we experience, every reaction we have follows a pattern. Whether we realize it or not, our emotional responses are not random, they are deeply ingrained habits, shaped by past experiences, beliefs, and conditioning. And at the core of these patterns are triggers. Specific events, words, or situations that set off an automatic emotional reaction. Think about the last time you felt an overwhelming surge of anger, frustration, or anxiety. Did it really come out of nowhere, or was there a specific moment, a particular phrase someone said, a certain look they gave you, or a situation that reminded you of something from your past? More often than not, these reactions are not about the present moment at all. They are echoes of past experiences being replayed in real time. Imagine someone who gets defensive whenever they receive criticism. On the surface, it looks like they simply don't like being corrected. But if you dig deeper, you might find a pattern. Maybe growing up, they were constantly criticized by a parent, a teacher, or someone they respected. Over time, their brain learned to associate criticism with rejection or failure. So now, even constructive feedback triggers an emotional response that feels much bigger than the situation calls for. Or take someone who always shuts down during conflict. Every time tension rises, they withdraw. If you trace the pattern back, maybe you'll find that in their childhood, arguments led to shouting, instability, or even abandonment. Their brain learned that conflict is dangerous, so now even a simple disagreement with a friend or partner triggers a fight or flight response, causing them to retreat instead of engage. But triggers are not just emotional, they are physiological. The body responds before the mind even has time to catch up. A raised voice, a particular smell, a familiar environment, these can all activate memories stored deep in the nervous system. And the moment that trigger is activated, the brain switches into autopilot. You're no longer responding to the present moment, you're reacting to a past wound that hasn't fully healed. But here's the problem. Most people never take the time to recognize their patterns. They assume their reactions are just who they are. They say things like, I've always been this way, I can't help it, that's just how I react. But emotional responses are not fixed traits, they are learned behaviors, and anything learned can be unlearned. The first step is awareness, noticing the pattern, asking yourself, when do I feel the strongest emotional reactions? What situations bring out the worst in me? What are the common threads? When you start to recognize the patterns, you begin to take back control. You stop feeling like a victim of your emotions and start becoming an observer of them. The second step is identifying the trigger. If you can pinpoint what sets off the emotional response, you create a gap between the trigger and the reaction. That gap is where real change happens. Instead of instantly snapping at someone, shutting down, or feeling overwhelmed, you pause, you recognize, oh, this is one of my triggers. This is an old pattern trying to take over. And in that moment, you have a choice. Repeat the pattern or rewrite it. The final step is reprogramming. This is where intentional action comes in. If your pattern is defensiveness, you practice pausing before responding to criticism. If your pattern is shutting down, you practice staying engaged in the conversation. If your pattern is anxiety, you practice grounding techniques to remind your nervous system that you are safe. It's not easy and it doesn't happen overnight, but the more you do it, the more you weaken the old neural pathways and strengthen new ones. What most people don't realize is that triggers lose their power when they are met with awareness. The moment you shine a light on a pattern, it stops controlling you. Because the truth is, our emotional reactions are not just about what's happening now. They are reflections of what we've been through. And once we see them clearly, we no longer have to be prisoners of the past. We can break free from the patterns that no longer serve us and create new ones that align with who we want to become. There is a fundamental truth about human behavior. We are not robots. We are not programmed to react in a fixed way to every situation we encounter. Yet for most people, life feels like a series of automatic reactions. Someone cuts them off in traffic and they explode in anger. A coworker makes a critical comment and they immediately feel defensive. A challenge arises and stress overtakes them before they even have a chance to think. But what if there was another way? What if in every moment, no matter how intense the situation, there was a space, a brief pause, where we could choose how to respond? Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, famously said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This space is the difference between reacting impulsively and responding intentionally. It is the key to emotional mastery, self-control, and the ability to navigate life's challenges with clarity instead of chaos. Most people go through life in a reactive state. Something happens and they respond. Without thinking, they yell, they shut down, they blame, they panic. But what they don't realize is that their reaction is not the only option. It's just the one they've practiced the most. The space between stimulus and response exists for everyone, but it's often so small that we don't even notice it. The key is learning to expand that space, to stretch the pause between what happens to us and what we do next. Think about a heated argument. When someone says something hurtful, the natural instinct is to fire back. The words leave their mouth, and before you even process what was said, you're already in attack mode. But if you train yourself to recognize the space between stimulus and response, you pause, you take a breath, you ask yourself, what is the best way to handle this? Do I want to escalate or de-escalate? Do I want to prove a point or do I want to understand? That one moment of awareness changes the entire trajectory of the conversation. Or imagine receiving unexpected bad news. The instinct might be to spiral into panic, to catastrophize, to assume the worst. But if you recognize the space, you give yourself a moment to process. You remind yourself that your first reaction is just that, a reaction. It's not necessarily the truth. It's not necessarily the best way forward. Expanding the space between stimulus and response is not about suppressing emotions. It's about managing them. It's about taking a step back, observing the situation, and making a choice from a place of clarity rather than impulse. And one of the most powerful ways to do this is through breath. Breathing is one of the fastest ways to interrupt an automatic reaction. When emotions rise, the body tenses, the heart rate increases, and the brain goes into fight or flight mode. But when you take a slow, deep breath, you signal to your nervous system that you are in control. That single breath creates space. It gives you a moment to ask, what do I want my next move to be? Another way to expand this space is through mindfulness, training yourself to be present, to observe your thoughts without immediately acting on them. When a stressful situation arises, instead of getting lost in the emotion, you acknowledge it. I feel angry right now. I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed. Just that simple act of naming the emotion gives you distance from it. It reminds you that you are not your emotion. You are the observer of it. The more you practice, the more you realize that no one and nothing can make you react a certain way. Yes, situations can be triggering. Yes, emotions can be intense. But the final choice, how you respond, will always be yours. We don't have to be at the mercy of our instincts. We don't have to live on autopilot, repeating the same reactions over and over again. In every moment, there is a space. And in that space, we have the power to decide who we want to be. Most people assume that emotions are purely mental, that if they feel anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed, the solution lies in thinking differently and changing their mindset. And while mindset is important, what many don't realize is that emotions are deeply connected to the body. Physiology, the way we breathe, stand, move, and hold ourselves, plays a crucial role in shaping how we feel. The body and the mind are not separate entities. They are part of the same system, constantly communicating with each other. And the way we use our bodies can either reinforce stress, fear, and doubt, or it can build resilience, confidence, and strength. Think about how your body responds to stress. When you're anxious or under pressure, what happens? Your shoulders tense up, your breathing becomes shallow, your heart beats faster, your posture collapses, your entire body shifts into a defensive, protective state. This isn't just a coincidence, it's biology. When the brain perceives a threat, real or imagined, it triggers the fight or flight response, flooding the body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This prepares you to react, but if you stay in this state for too long, it takes a toll, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Now consider the opposite. Think about the body language of someone who is confident, relaxed, and emotionally strong. Their posture is upright. Their shoulders are back. Their breathing is deep and controlled. Their movements are deliberate. Their body signals a completely different message, not just to others, but to themselves. And that's the key. How we hold and carry our bodies doesn't just reflect how we feel, it actually influences how we feel. One of the fastest ways to shift emotional states is through breathing. When emotions are high, whether it's fear, anger, or stress, the breath becomes rapid and shallow, reinforcing the feeling of panic. But slowing down the breath, taking deep diaphragmatic breaths, tells the nervous system that there is no immediate threat. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for relaxation and recovery. This isn't just theory, it's neuroscience. Something as simple as taking 5 slow, deep breaths can reduce cortisol levels, lower heart rate, and create an immediate sense of calm. Posture is another powerful tool for emotional resilience. Studies have shown that standing in an upright, open posture for just 2 minutes can increase testosterone, the hormone linked to confidence and assertiveness, and decrease cortisol. This means that something as small as adjusting how you sit or stand can literally change your biochemistry, making you feel stronger, more capable, and more in control. Think about a moment when you felt defeated or discouraged. How did your body respond? Did you slump your shoulders, lower your gaze, cross your arms? Now imagine shifting that posture, lifting your chin, squaring your shoulders, opening your stance. That single adjustment sends a signal to your brain, I am in control. I can handle this. It might seem simple, but over time, small shifts in physiology build the foundation for emotional resilience. Movement is another essential factor. When emotions build up, stress, frustration, sadness, most people stay stuck, both mentally and physically. They sit in the same place, replaying the same thoughts, reinforcing the same emotions, but movement breaks that cycle. Physical activity, even something as basic as a walk, releases endorphins, improves circulation, and resets the nervous system. This is why so many people find clarity and emotional release after exercising. It's not just about fitness, it's about rewiring emotional patterns through movement. Then there's facial expression, something so small yet incredibly powerful. The simple act of smiling, even when you don't feel like it, has been shown to activate neural pathways associated with positive emotions. It's called the facial feedback hypothesis, the idea that facial expressions influence emotional experiences. This means that forcing a smile, even for a few seconds, can trick the brain into feeling happier, reducing stress, and improving overall mood. The connection between physiology and emotional resilience isn't just about science. It's something we see in everyday life. Have you ever noticed how great leaders carry themselves, how athletes prepare before a competition, how performers take control of a stage? They understand, whether consciously or unconsciously, that the body influences the mind, that standing tall, breathing deeply, and using movement creates a psychological shift that allows them to perform at their best. Emotional resilience isn't just about willpower. It's not about suppressing emotions or forcing yourself to be strong. It's about learning how to use the tools already within you, your breath, your posture, your movement, to regulate emotions, to shift out of negative states, and to cultivate a mindset of strength and control. Because the way we use our bodies is one of the most overlooked yet most effective ways to master our emotions. Emotional mastery is not about suppressing feelings or pretending that challenges don't exist. It's about learning to navigate them with awareness, intention, and control. It's about recognizing that emotions are data, not directives, that perspective shapes our experiences, and that our patterns and triggers don't have to define us. It's about understanding that between stimulus and response there is a space where we have the power to choose our reaction, to shift our perspective, and to rewrite the stories we tell ourselves. And perhaps most importantly, emotional resilience is not just a mental game. It's deeply rooted in physiology. The way we breathe, move, and carry ourselves doesn't just reflect how we feel, it influences how we feel. Small shifts in posture, breath, and movement can transform our emotional state, giving us the ability to face life's challenges with clarity, strength, and confidence. The key to emotional mastery is not found in external circumstances. It's found within us. It's in our ability to pause, to reflect, to shift our mindset, and to use our bodies as a tool for resilience. Because at the end of the day, we are not at the mercy of our emotions. We are the architects of our responses, the designers of our perspective, and the creators of our own emotional strength.